Former Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, "No hour of life is wasted that's spent in the saddle." And he's so right. Speaking from personal experience, riding and being around horses can calm your nerves, alleviate stress, provide enjoyment, relaxation, and fun in the fresh air. So whether you've only ridden a horse once in your life, plan to ride in the future, own a horse of your own, or simply enjoy learning more about horses, you've come to the right place. I'm Juliet, and this is my horse Romeo, and today I'll walk you through the first step of learning to ride and care for horses, called tacking up. The first step of good horsemanship is learning how to properly clean and saddle a horse, which is what tacking up is all about. Horse equipment is something that riders call tack, and the first piece of tack to put on the horse is called the halter, which is this harnessed-like piece of equipment that goes around the horse's face. When putting on a horse's halter, you want to stand to the left side of your horse and move closer to their head. Make sure that this buckle is on the left side towards you. Then notice this round circular section that looks like a dog's collar. You want to slip that over their nose, take this strap in your right hand, put it over the horse's head, behind their ears, and then begin to buckle the strap. Once your horse's halter is successfully put on, you can begin the next step to the process of tacking up, called grooming. Grooming means cleaning your horse, and it's essential to the horse's overall health, the condition of their fur and skin, and general comfort when you ride them. The first grooming tool we use is called the curry comb, and it's this round rubber brush with tiny ridges. It's used to get out any loose hairs or dust under the horse's fur. You want to take your curry comb, brush it in round circular motions all over the horse's fur. You want to brush their neck, you want to curry their back, you want to curry their sides, and even the area down by their hooves. Currying a horse stimulates natural protective oils beneath their fur, along with exfoliating dead skin. And just saying, Romeo loves being curried. It's like a massage for him. Another reason currying your horse is important is to see if they have any sores anywhere. A lot of times if a horse has a sore muscle or a bruise beneath their fur, they'll flinch or shy away in the areas you curry them, which may indicate your horse is too sore to ride. The next grooming tool we use is called the soft brush. Now the soft brush can sometimes be called the hard brush depending on the coarseness of the bristles. For Romeo, I'm going to use the soft brush because he's very clean and his fur is pretty fine. Unlike the curry comb, the soft brush doesn't go in round circular motions or against the grain of the horse's fur. You want to take your soft brush, brush it in the direction your horse's fur goes in fast, quick strokes, flicking the brush up after each stroke. The soft brush creates the clean, shiny look on the horse's fur that gets away any loose hairs or excess dust from currying. The next grooming tool to use after the soft brush is called the mane and tail brush. And the mane and tail brush is very straightforward. It looks like a human hairbrush, and it's used to get out any tangles or dirt in your horse's mane and tail. And an important thing to note is that brushing a horse's tail is a lot more complicated than brushing their mane. Position is key here. Stand to the side of your horse instead of directly behind. When you're standing directly behind a horse, you're standing in their blind spot, which can make them nervous and anxious. So to avoid spooking your horse or potentially getting kicked, stand to the side of your horse, take their tail in your hand, and then proceed to brush. After the mane and tail brush comes the hoof pick. The hoof pick gets out any dirt or rocks in your horse's hooves. And hoof picking your horse is probably the most essential part to grooming because any stones or dirt lodged in your horse's hooves can cause pain, leave bruises, and even cause a horse disease called thrush. So picking your horse's hooves is something you want to do every time before you ride and every time after you ride. When you pick a horse's hoof, you want to lean into their shoulder, run your hand along their leg, and pick up their hoof. Notice this triangular section right here? It's called the frog. You want to pick alongside that section instead of on it because the frog's really sensitive. Now Romeo doesn't have a lot of dirt or any stones in his hooves, but it's always good to check. After you finished hoof picking your horse and grooming, it's time to saddle up. The first thing to put on when saddling up are the saddle pads. Now saddle pads provide protection and support for your saddle. Saddle pads not only protect a saddle from getting any dust or sweat on it, but it also protects a horse from getting any rubs and sores from the saddle. There are two saddle pads to put on. The first is called the full pad, and it looks like a baby blanket. The second is called the half pad, which looks like a smaller, thicker version of the full pad. The first one to put on is called the full pad, and the second one you put on is the half pad. Now notice how these pads rest on top of the horse's withers, which is this round bone above their shoulders. After the saddle pads, you can put on the actual saddle. The saddle goes right on top of these two pads, right on top of the horse's withers. When you put the saddle on, make sure that each side of the saddle is even on both sides, and make sure the saddle pads haven't bunched up when you put the saddle on. The next thing you want to do is make sure the saddle is in the right position. And I usually do this by sliding the saddle above his withers and then back down, just to be doubly sure the saddle's in the right place, and also to make sure there's no friction between the horse's fur and the saddle. The final step you want to take when putting on the saddle is making sure there's air between the pommel, the top of the saddle, and their withers. And I do this by giving the saddle a bit of a shake. This just prevents any pinching or rubbing. In order to keep the saddle in place and prevent it from falling off the horse's back, the final piece of equipment we use is called the girth. And this secures the saddle in place. It looks like a large belt, and as you can see, it has two buckles that attach to the saddle straps. Now the saddle has 3 straps called billets. The middle billet we never use because it's a backup in case the other 2 break. When putting on the girth, you want to lift the saddle flap up with your elbow, take the girth, and then begin to buckle it. I eventually buckle it to the 4th hole, but for now I'm going to buckle it on the 3rd hole, and this is because horses often puff out their stomachs when you put the girth on, so to make things easier for myself when I buckle his other side, I'm going to buckle it 1 hole down. Now notice how each of these buckles are on the same hole. You want to make sure the girth's buckles are evenly matched when you put the girth on. In other words, one should not be on the 4th hole and one should not be on the 2nd hole. They both should be on the same hole. Now putting the girth on the 4th hole eventually for Romeo works great for him. Every horse is different, but if you can memorize the specific hole you buckle your girth at, it'll save you a lot of time. Now I go to the other side of Romeo and I do the same thing. I check again to make sure that his saddle pads are in the right place, along with his saddle. Then I reach under his stomach, I grab the girth, and then I begin to buckle it. Now, depending on how big your horse is or what size girth you have, this side may be buckled on a different hole than the other side. For Romeo, I usually buckle it on the 5th side, on his left side, but right now I'm going to buckle it on the 2nd hole. After your horse has its girth secured, your horse is all ready to go. This is how you tack up a horse using English tack. By first putting on the halter, then by grooming the horse using the curry comb, the soft brush, mane and tail brush, then the hoof pick. Finally, the saddle goes on with first the 2 saddle pads, then the actual saddle secured by the girth. Grooming and saddling your horse is the first step of learning how to ride and care for horses. As English 20th century poet Mary Webb once said, you have to saddle your dreams before you ride them. So next time you find yourself around horses or you're near them, you're prepared to saddle up and ride.